Hello and welcome. Right, and so I'll get the names down. And today we will cover, I'm going to cover two things because I'll send out an announcement. I have a loved one who's getting married in Tennessee. And so I'm leaving on Wednesday of next week. So I won't be available for next Thursday's Zoom. So I'm going to have to do it today. I apologize. All right. So we're going to do the northern colonies, and then I'm going to give some clues on test number one. Now, note I usually give more out on test one than anything else. I kind of want to let you fly on test two and three, so I may not give as much on those. Okay, but we will probably go over a lot on this first one. You haven't seen my test, you haven't seen the way I write questions, etc. So at any rate, all right. So thank you for your patience with the correcting, as I've only done one assignment so far. I plan to improve on that. Let's see here. Where is it? Let's see here. I'm trying to share with you, and it's supposed to be northern colonies. Shoot. Let's see if I can open it while we're on online together. That's a mistake of mine. I could have sworn it was open already. All right, so can you see that? Can I get a okay from someone, a thumbs up or something? Can you see the Northern Colonies handout as I do? Okay, thank you, Calvin. All right, and so with number one, it's court history, right? It's the history you learn as kids, written by the winners themselves, in which they're going to pat themselves on the back, right? They're going to contend that America is an exceptional land, and it largely is exceptional thanks to the New England states, right? So as kids, we learned about like the the Mayflower Compact and how that kind of insinuated the social contract, how we're giving our permission for a government to rule over us, how they were looking for religious freedom as they were being persecuted by the Anglican clergy back in England as separatists from the Anglican Church. And there's some truth to that, all right? And religion plays a lot into today's topic, all right? Remember, the Reformation was a protest against practices, assumptions, powers of the Catholic Church that these so-called reformers thought were non-biblical. They couldn't be supported by the Bible itself, right? So, of course, you have Martin Luther, who was an Augustinian monk in Germany, and he grew to believe in a different way of salvation from what the Catholic Church was teaching. And then he put his famous 55 Theses on the post of the church and challenged them to a debate on 55 different points of contention that he had with the Catholic hierarchy. And they didn't think that he, as a humble monk from Germany, warranted such a response from the papacy to have such a debate, and so they ordered him to recant, to change his views, and he stubbornly would not. And so it starts the break, right, of modern Protestant Christianity. Yes, Kyle.
Just before you get going too far, all I see is just like your all the files that you have. I don't see the actual assignment document.
Okay, thank you for telling me that. So let me. Okay, I just hit stop sharing, where it should be back to. Let's see here. Stop sharing. All right, and let me try this again. Now it should be. How is that?
There we go.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, good. So at any rate, um, the Protestants, right? That was their main contention, is that they wanted to do things just strictly by the Bible, and they challenged, of course, the apostolic succession of the Pope, um, and other things as well. So at any rate, these were Protestants who wanted just strictly biblical Christianity, and they felt like the Anglican Church was too Catholic-like, because really, the king Henry VIII, he stood up for the Catholic Church amidst the Reformation initially, and his problem was a personal one, right? They wouldn't annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. The Pope wouldn't. So he broke from the Pope, but he kept everything very Catholic-like with the Anglican Church and its rituals, its belief in transubstantiation, that the body and blood of Christ are literal in the communion and the Eucharist. The apocryphal books that when they met in the 300s in Nicaea, they separated because there was contention over them, 7 books. So they kept them separate. The Protestants threw them out, and the Catholics kept them. The Anglicans kept the apocryphal books as well. And one of them, the second book of Maccabees, I went to a Catholic college, so I had to study all this. The second book of Maccabees gives support for belief in purgatory. And so the Protestants, believing that salvation is a gift that you can't earn, that you just simply accept from Christ, that there was no room for purgatory or penance or reconciliation as a ritual, as a sacrament. So at any rate, the Anglican Church was very Catholic-like in those respects, and so they tried to worship God in their own way and what they thought was more biblical. And there is an archbishop named William Laud, Laud, and he had some arrested, shut down their churches, fined them for money, and began persecuting these different reformers who didn't want to worship in the way of the Anglican Church. So they went to the Netherlands first, to a town called Leiden, and supposedly they didn't like the ungodliness there. That the Dutch were very tolerant, but they were very worldly, and they were worried about bringing up their kids in that kind of environment with temptations, etc. Supposedly, according to their accounts. So they come and they covenant with non-separatists because they didn't have enough money themselves. But the separatists, 44 men, heads of their households, signed the Mayflower Compact, and they agreed to have to make a covenant with themselves for a government to rule over them, and a covenant with God to try to have a holy republic, if you will. And the Puritans came 10 years later in much bigger numbers, north of them in Boston, and they were famous for the City Upon a Hill, John Winthrop, the sermon, whereby they felt like where Christ had said that to preach the gospel to all the corners of the earth. They felt like they were grabbing one of the last corners of the earth to bring the gospel to the Americas, and that therefore that could expedite the second coming of Jesus. And so at any rate, but it was contingent upon conversions and contingent upon the holiness of the people, because they had this notion of a covenant that they made with God that they got from the Old Testament of the Bible, right? With the Hebrews, the Jewish people, whereby if they followed the 10 Commandments well, God would bless them, and if they didn't, he would not. The Pilgrims and Puritans followed that notion. So at any rate, when they came here, we're choosing to look only at the positive stuff here in number 1. So for one, them believing that every born-again Christian should be empowered to read and interpret the Bible for himself or herself. They were highly in favor of widespread literacy. And matter of fact, they boasted the highest literacy rates of all the Americas, of any colony. And they were very proud of that. But notice the first law that mandated public schools was called the Old Deluder Law. It was named after the deceiver, Satan, implying that when the kids learn how to read and read the Bible for themselves, Satan would be less capable of catching them in his snares and tricks. So at any rate, it was very highly religious, but they were very much for literacy and for education. They established Harvard in 1636. And so the general positive adjective and attribute that I give them from what I've read from other books, it's not my own idea, this is court history, was that they were progressive. They were ahead of their time. They were at the forefront of change. All right. So not only when it came to literacy and education, also within education, they were for what would be known as in the 1600s as the empirical scientific method, as a way to truth. The fancy word for that is epistemology, the origin of knowledge. Their epistemology was pretty modern, was to utilize the scientific method and try to use inductive reasoning from your findings to come to your conclusions. And then, of course, they felt like other things were above science in the realm of reason that had to be taken by faith. So like the idea of the Trinity, of God in three persons, they contended was an example of something that had to be taken by faith that reason and logic could not come to in and of themselves. So at any rate, another thing that what manner by which they claimed they were progressive was their democratic organizations. All right, they had the New England Town Hall Meeting. Anyone who was a citizen could participate in the meeting, could bring forth a resolution, and they would vote by popular vote, 50% plus one, on the resolutions. And so they were very proud of that, of their New England Town Hall meetings. They also were proud of the fact that their churches were congregational. Each congregation was autonomous. It was pretty much independent. It didn't have like a presbyters, like deacons that looked over, a series of separate churches. It certainly didn't have like the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church, the Episcopal form of archbishops and bishops, etc. And so they were proud of that. They also democratically elected their reverends, their preachers, and they also democratically ousted them. So they were proud of that as well. Okay, so by these manners in which they contended that they were ahead of their time. They also were rather capitalistic. They, for one, I think it was because most of them were people from the city that moved into the New England colonies. The generic term for that is the bourgeoisie, right? The people of the city. And so being bourgeois, they had gotten a taste of the better life economically back in Liverpool, Bristol, London, and now they're especially getting it here across the ocean. But they technically did not have the ties to the House of Lords, the upper appointed branch of Parliament back in England, the Privy Council, who were hand selected. They weren't nobles, and so hence they were not for the mercantilist system, whereby you had to have the right papers to do what you did for a living. So they were kind of defiant of the mercantilist restrictions early on. So people somewhat took the liberty of choosing their own vocations, and the people in their environs all were okay with that because they were doing the same thing. So you have the beginnings of kind of an open market, a capitalistic like economy, and even so, they had some regulation over it. If you hoarded and then you drove up the price for something, they could put a price ceiling on what you were selling because they said that was immoral and greedy, etc. And so, kind of like progressives later on in American history for a regulatory capitalist economy. So at any rate, for all those reasons, we contend that they were ahead of their time. And we're bragging on them here, right? And then another one that I didn't put in here that goes without saying is they contended that they were idealistic. And remember, idealistic is that you don't see the world as it is; you see it as it ought to be. They wanted to improve the world. They wanted to improve their institutions. They wanted an environment that was the envy of all other colonies, and they were proud of that fact. And then lastly, notice I'm not mentioning the Puritans, right, who were 10 years later up in Boston in Massachusetts Bay Colony, but I'm selectively choosing the data of the Pilgrims, who were 10 years sooner, 1620, geographically beneath them in Plymouth, and Plymouth Colony, and they signed a treaty of equality with Massasoit. And remember, Massasoit was the Thanksgiving guy, the Thanksgiving chief, Sachem, as they were known. And so they had a treaty of equality, and with the Algonquian speaking natives, that was very anomalous. That was very out of the ordinary. Most of the time, they employed the term agua, like the Spanish agua, but with a W, AGWA in the Algonquian language. And that meant subjected to and subordinated to. And so usually someone was subordinated to someone else, and yet they were paying them tribute in one form or another, giving them food so much on a yearly basis, handing over warriors to fight with and for them, or whatever it might be that they demanded as your superior. And of course, they just did it as kind of a might makes right diplomacy. If you were more powerful, you lorded it over your neighbors. And so the Pilgrims, this was pretty impressive. They signed a treaty of equality with the Wampanoag Confederacy of Massasoit. And so they agreed to be military allies, and they agreed what was rare amongst the English colonists is they had political equality within each other's realms. So hence, if a pilgrim went into Wampanoag territory and committed a crime under Wampanoag traditions and laws, the Wampanoags were free to punish him as they saw fit. And then the other way around, if a Native American came into Plymouth and violated a Plymouth law, then the Pilgrims were free to punish him as they saw justice. So the fact that it was equal both ways was pretty anomalous. That was not the norm at all, and the Pilgrims were proud of that. All right, showing that kind of respect. And they had a pretty long peace, by the way. Around 1621 is when they made this arrangement, this alliance, and they went to war in what was known as King Philip's War with this partner in 1674. So they made it like 54 years in peace. All right. So then I take a 180 on this one, right? And now this is what we would call revisionist history, right? Whereby revisionists are a lot more cynical, a lot more critical. A lot of times they apply conflict history. Remember, conflict history is that you look at power struggles and you make villains of the winners, and you try to elicit sympathy for those who lost. Okay. So at any rate, that's what we have here with the Puritans. So first of all, with their foreign policy, the Puritans immediately demanded tribute and subjugation to the Narragansetts, the Pequot, the Wampanoag, and the Patuxet, and these other tribes all around the Massachusetts, New England area. Matter of fact, they even demanded at one point in time tribute from their Pilgrim neighbors. So they played the bully in their foreign policy. So what I say here is that by certain factors that played in, the Puritans did not die from their own smallpox and other pathogens that the natives were dying in droves with. They had technology that impressed the Native Americans. And then they had cases with some of their missionaries that are supposedly just crazy, where they had like religious competition, and the Native American quote pagan priest was hit by a lightning bolt in public, and many of them soon thereafter converted to Christianity. But at any rate, that what they ascribed to the Pilgrims or the Puritans was Manitou, and Manitou was power from the gods, right? And the Puritans very quickly took advantage of that and tried to bully all their neighbors. Okay, so at any rate, they only went 6 years before they got in a war with the Pequot, and it was a matter of arrogance regarding jurisdiction. There was a guy named Captain John Stone who was abducting Native American children and holding them for ransom, and he was murdered by a couple Pequot warriors, supposedly. And so they demanded that the Pequot warriors be brought to justice in Boston, and the Pequot said they would not do such. And so at any rate, that was the major spark that ignited that war. But also what the Puritans did is when they fought a single tribe, they would not discriminate during war, and they would fight all the other tribes, because they would collectively contend that the Native Americans were of the devil and devil worshippers, etc. That very Manichaean outlook, right? Manichaean is that you don't see the complexity of life. All you see is good and evil, black and white, and nothing in between. And that's the way the Puritans were, very Manichaean. And so, for instance, they were supposed to be allies with the Narragansett. And when they went to war with the Pequot, they attacked a Narragansett village. And the Narragansett, amidst the slaughter, one of them put the treaty itself on a tree that stated that the Narragansett and the Puritans were supposed to be at peace, to try to shame the Puritans. And it did nothing as such. They continued to fight the Narragansett, even though the Narragansett were not their enemies. Because again, they were blindly fighting all Native Americans when they went to war. So they played the ugly imperialist, the Puritans did. Okay. And then domestically, the Puritans were very exclusivist, very angst-filled, very tyrannical. Okay. So the irony, right, is the Puritans contended that all the kids should learn to read so that they can interpret the Bible for themselves. But the Puritan leaders, who were elected time and time again, the same ones, they determined the official interpretations of Scripture, and if you couldn't dissent from that. So, for instance, there was Anne Hutchinson. She was having, as a woman, which was forbidden, she was having Bible studies on her own, leading them. And then she also implied, because they were Calvinist, believing that that man is so depraved and so sinful that he can't even choose of his own volition to repent and come to Jesus, that God has to take the initiative himself and save them. And he decides who he's going to save and who he's not. And so as Calvinists, they were always living with that anxiety, that angst of, am I going to go to heaven or am I going to go to hell? Am I amongst the elect or not? And so Anne Hutchinson contended that, as Jesus had stated in Scripture, that people are going to be surprised as to who are going to be seen as the wheat going to heaven and who are going to be seen as the tares going to hell. And so she more than implied that some of the Puritan leaders were likely tares that were going to go to hell, misleading the people. And so they demanded that she recant, and when she refused to, they excommunicated her on pain of death. If she were to come back to Boston, they would execute her. And Roger Williams, he wanted rights for the Native Americans to acquiesce, to accept the sale of their lands. He wanted a separation of church and state. And so they tried to get him to recant, and he would not. And he was so sickened by the tyrannical atmosphere that he lobbied and received a charter to establish Rhode Island as a proprietor of Rhode Island. And the first thing he did was establish religious liberty and freedom of conscience in Rhode Island as kind of because he saw the Puritans as an anti-model of what he did not want. So at any rate, in order to be a citizen, you had to be an accepted church member. In order to be a church member, you had to convince them that you had had a born again experience with Jesus. They had to believe it. If they didn't, you were not accepted into church membership. Then, if they did believe that you had been born again, they wanted proof that you had become holier since becoming born again, what they call sanctification. And you had to have letters of recommendation from other people to prove that you had become a holier person than you were before. And so if you were not accepted, you could not be a citizen, you could not partake of communion, and you were literally segregated in seating at church. And then in addition to that, their idea of the covenant, because they believed that if anybody sinned in the community, God would turn his back on the whole community, not just that individual who was sinning. They established offices like selectmen. The selectmen went door to door spying on the people to see if they were sinning, if they were up to no good or not in their personal lives. Crazy stuff. So at any rate, they could be very tyrannical with this notion of the covenant. Okay. And so, yeah, put that all together. You're probably not surprised that it was the Puritans who were responsible for the Salem witch trials. Okay. Much more controversial than their Pilgrim counterparts. And then also, by the way, there's a guy named Miantonomi. He was a sachem amongst the Narragansett. He traveled all the way across the Atlantic to tell on the Puritans to the king. And when he got back, an ally to the Puritans named Uncas put a hatchet in the back of his head, killed him. And John Winthrop wrote, "Such was the justified end of proud Miantonomi." So the Puritans pretty much didn't deny it, that they had this man put to death for telling on them. All right. So they had a dark side. Any questions so far? All right. And then with the Salem witch trials, what I try to do is try to make sense of them. Okay. So for one, I show how the community was contentious to begin with. You had property disputes. You had Salem Village trying to become chartered as its own town away from Salem town. You had the drama with the preachers, like 4 in a row up to the leading into the Salem witch trials. Literally 4 preachers in a row. There was drama, either that there certain people didn't like them and they refused to pay their salary, or they were given land from the Putnams family who were wealthy, and people were mad at the Putnams for giving them too lavish of a lifestyle, or they didn't like their sermons. It's just one thing after another. It's incredible. All right. So at any rate, you have evidence of a very contentious environment. You also had King William's War. That was a war with the French and the French Native American allies, and particularly the Wabanaki. And the Wabanaki were engaging in raids all throughout Massachusetts Bay Colony and massacring families. So there was great angst at this time, leading into the Salem witch trials. Then in addition to that, you have, let's see here. So they had the contention, you have the war going on, the lawsuits, okay. And then a culture that led to hysteria. Like I said, they had a almost inordinate fixation with the devil in Puritan culture. The devil was everywhere. The devil was always nipping at their heels. They had a curious juxtaposition that I read in books, that on the one hand, they felt like the devil came to those who opened the door to him, right? And that could be seen through Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good, um, a woman named Martin, Susanna Martin, and others who didn't go to church. They had lots of conflicts with their neighbors. They were kind of marginal characters in Salem, seen as being kind of rebels. So it makes perfect sense that the Puritans would think that they were witches. Okay. They were the easy targets, so to speak. But at the same time, they contended that, as the Bible says, Satan comes as disguised as an angel of light. And so he would like to go through and use, unbeknownst to them, holy and people that you wouldn't expect, right? God fearing, good, highly reputable people. And then, not to mention the book of Job, right? The book of Job, there was a divine test because Job happened to be such a good, holy man. The devil was allowed to attack him. So that's a strange juxtaposition it had, whereby they were, they would look after the marginal characters and think, of course, she's opened her doors to the devil. But also holy people that they would think, no, certainly not this woman. And they're like, oh no, but that's the way the devil works, right? Etc. So at any rate, and then credulity, the idea of black Sabbaths, witches flying on brooms, malevolent sorcery, pacts with the devil, signing in his book as the counterpart to like the Lamb's Book of Life in the Bible. These, you're not going to find these in the Bible. Okay. These are extra biblical supplemental additions that came from medieval Europe. Okay. And they brought this credulity, this willingness to easily believe something that is fantastic and illogical, etc., without a healthy dose of skepticism. They brought this over the Atlantic Ocean. Okay. So they also wrote books, Malleus Maleficarum, Illustrious Providences. And in these books, they would write, and Cotton Mather wrote the latter one. And the Mather family were very instrumental in Puritan Massachusetts Bay Colony. And he would say telltale signs of witches. And it becomes bizarre. That's all I could say. They have some type of secret teat hidden on their body, some type of appendage that looks like a mole, whereby they suckle demons. Like, where do they come up with this stuff? And then of course spectral evidence, whereby people contend that while there's clear evidence that a suspect was asleep in his or her cabin, that his or her specter, his or her ghostly, invisible, intangible image came and tormented someone else somewhere else while their body was still at home. And so how do you prove that? How do you disprove that? Well, they're going to take this as available evidence in these trials. Malevolent sorcery. If you say there was Sarah Good, she fought over a cow, and she said, fine, keep the cow and may he die. And the cow dropped dead within a week. And they said that only witchcraft could have done that. So there was no coincidences. If you had verbally wished ill will on someone or something, and something subsequently happened, tragically, you must have had the power to have made it happen. Okay. And so all this was admissible evidence in the court of law. And then add to it the young girls that were present in there. They would begin to screech, to cry out, to scratch themselves, to stiffen themselves as like a board where they couldn't move. And they would contend that one of the suspects was having that effect on them right then and there in the court. And there was such credulity in believing these young girls that this was happening right before their eyes, right? And yes, there is a scary, scary quote that I have found in The Witches by Stacy Schiff. And one of the young girls, I kid you not, admitted later that she did this for sport. For sport. 19 people were going to be hanged. Two people, one drowned, one pressed to death, and they killed a dog as well. So, at any rate, crazy stuff. So, what I'm trying to do on this one is I'm trying to make sense of it and saying how it was fertile soil for the Salem witch trial to happen. All these things combined. Okay. And then at the end, because this is a pretty long section and I didn't want to go into it, I just kind of tease you with this at the end. Some historians adhere to the ergo poisoning theory as well. When you look at the alleged symptoms of the afflicted girls, a lot of them line up with the symptoms of ergo poisoning from rye bread going bad. All right, so then we have court history of Pennsylvania. Okay, and this is great man history. We're not looking at bigger forces like economic forces, culture. We're looking at a singular leader as having greatly influenced his colony, and we're saying how wonderful he is on number 4, and that is William Penn. William Penn. It is attributed to his conversion to Quaker Christianity. So remember, with the Quakers, right, is what they were really stressed was meekness. Okay, and remember, meekness is gentle kindness with the strength that you have, right? Gentle kindness with the strength that you have. They were real big on meekness. And so a case in point here for William Penn, right, is he has it was called a palinate. Let me try to write it out. Palatinate type of Palatinate. It is an old medieval type of land ownership. Okay, whereby he is the proprietor, he is the owner of all Pennsylvania. Okay, and then hence, like in the medieval times with feudalism, with the crown, is that even when he grants people land, even when they purchase land, they're really on paper only renters, because he is the feudal lord over all that land. So hence he could demand that they pay him these. They were known as quitrents, 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 and so he could have really lorded power economically over everybody. Okay, but he doesn't. Matter of fact, he sends out brochures, and he sends them out to non-WASP places in Europe. Remember, WASP is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and so that's mainly English, right? The Angles and Saxons took over after Rome had Britain. So non-WASP. So we're talking about Flanders, which is modern-day Belgium. We're talking about France. We're talking about Switzerland. We're talking about where else? Portugal. They went to the German 39 states. They went to all kinds of places, right? To offer cheap or even free land. I can't remember how many of the first ones it was, what the number was, but the first certain number of settlers received absolutely free land. Okay. And then after that, uh, I've read historians who said they would challenge anyone to find better land deals in any of the other 13 colonies as far as the cheaper price of land. Not only cheaper, but this land is known as being very fertile in Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania is going to be known as the breadbasket because it grew wheat so well. So he goes out of his way to these marginal areas of Europe to try to encourage people to come here, okay, and receive good deals with land. Then he goes out of his way with his connections to provide credit. Only New York was probably ahead of Pennsylvania in providing creditors, bankers coming here, because as they say, right, it takes money to make money. People who are wanting to become cash crop farmers or start a business of some sort, they oftentimes need a starting loan to get them going, right? And so William Penn was trying to make that happen. Then another one that really impresses me were the almshouses, ALMS. The almshouses were like gospel missions. If you were homeless and had nothing, you'd come there. You would be provided free food and quarters, and they would teach you a trade. They would set up these grog shops, GROG. These grog shops were places like where they learned to use iron for multiple reasons, etc. And they became artisans or skilled workers, so that they could leave the almshouses and their grog shops and start on their feet with their own business. So he made that happen in Pennsylvania, right? And then secondly, he shared political power. He was the governor, the proprietor and governor over Pennsylvania, and he established a bicameral or two-branch legislator to share power with him. And see what he says here? You shall be governed by laws of your own making. In short, whatever sober and free men can reasonably desire for ye security and improvement of their own happiness, I shall heartily comply with in his 1682 Constitution. All right. So he could have been a despot, but instead he was for a Republican form of government. And then lastly, with court history of William Penn, was the respect he showed and by the way, under the 1682 Constitution, is they established also like the gentleman in Rhode Island, Roger Williams, freedom of conscience in Pennsylvania. So notice you had like the beginnings of the Amish, right? The Mennonites, the Moravians, and all these other minor religious sects in the German states came and found refuge here in Pennsylvania. Right, so the grog shops and the almshouses. But what I should have had here somewhere was the fact of how he treated Native Americans. What they did, right, is they met every year, 1 year in Philadelphia and the next year in the Susquehannock territory of the Native Americans. And they followed Native American protocol. He literally would smoke the peace pipe with them. They would bring forth their grievances, and if he had any, he would bring forth his. And it was just a very organized way of keeping the peace diplomatically. Make sure that all land transactions were agreed upon by both parties. That was a big one. Any crimes by one, ethnic group in the territory of the other were freely dealt with, etc. So at any rate, William Penn, he learned their dialects, he followed their protocol, their diplomacy, and showed them great respect. And he too, like the Pilgrims, had a very long peace with the Puritans, or with the Puritans, with the Native Americans, 1682 to the 1750s. So he went there, his colony went like 70 years and much beyond his life before they went to war with the natives. And then I tried to find dirt on this guy because I always want to be well rounded. And so I went revisionist on number 5. And the best I could do was that this guy was constantly feeling pressure in his desire of bringing diversity, economic diversity to Pennsylvania, and as well as creditors to lend people money. Oftentimes, these businessmen made it a caveat, a condition that no Native Americans could be near them, because with different chroniclers and novels that were written at that time, people from Europe, out of their ignorance, they were scared to death of Native Americans. They were savages. So at any rate, he was constantly pressuring the Native Americans to sell more and more of their land. And I can't find any evidence in his diaries, etc., of him showing any type of a moral dilemma in doing that, because he had to have seen that this, in the long run, was going to hurt the Native Americans, just selling more and more of their territory. And there's not much evidence that he showed that he cared. So that's about as good as I could get on biographies on him, of trying to find some dirt on him. And then lastly, with number 6, is I just contend that, unlike in Pennsylvania and in Rhode Island, the toleration of different religions and nationalities and ethnicities in Dutch New Netherlands, or Dutch New York, was not predicated by the same tolerant worldview. It was not. It doesn't deserve credit like the others do. Why? Because I make the argument that they only tolerated others for economic benefit. So there was a guy that's known as the Black Turk Van Sally up in Albany. There are Jews living in New Amsterdam or New York City. They, in both cases, the governor of Dutch New Netherlands, as well as the Dutch West India Company leaders, okay, because this was a joint stock company colony. It wasn't a royal colony, like controlled by the Netherlands itself. It was a private company colony, and that was the Dutch West India Company. And in their language, it's VOC is the acronym. And so the VOC, you have these terrible quotes from them where they're saying, yeah, we know the Jews are a deceitful race. Their God is Mammon. They only look for their own profit. They're an enemy race. They're blasphemers of Christ. But because they're helping us make money, let them be. So that's my simple thesis on number 6, is that the Dutch officially were tolerant in New York, in New Netherlands, but not for the right reasons. It was largely for economic reasons. So remember that for the test. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, what I want to do is I want to go to the test. All right. So look at number 1. Which of the following is an alleged reason for which knowledge of Native American culture and history is incomplete? So remember that, number 1 of the very first assignment. Lack of sufficient written Native American sources, that is true. C. Vance Haynes' theory on Native American immigration from Asia does not dovetail with all radiometric carbon dated objects discovered. That's it, found in number 1. That is true. Alleged cultural, linguistic, and biological ties between Native Americans and indigenous Siberians have not convinced academia universally. That is also found in number 1. And European chroniclers are alleged by many to be ethnocentric and skewed. So that'd be all the above. Okay. So this is always tough for me to decide how many to go over and to what to do, like with heavy hints. So remember, I contended that the first signs of, quote, civilization and future U.S. territory were in the American Southwest and along the Mississippi. Okay, I did mention that. Okay. I did mention that there was a farming revolution very early. This is all in number 2. So many of the answers, you guys, are extracted from the argumentative assignments. European colonizers and modern academia usually look for evidence of manipulation of the environment, those 5 criteria that I mentioned. That also is true. So the Plains tribes, civilized first? No. That last one. So notice, like with number 2, you're actually ironically choosing the wrong answer, which of the following points was not. So I do that sometimes. I don't mean to confuse you. Number 3, you should get easily from number 3 and the first assignment. The shared tendencies, the shared qualities of Native Americans that were looked down upon by the Europeans. Number 4 is found in number 2. Innocent and childlike or bestial savages. You'll find that in number 2. Okay, even by today's standards, Spanish colonization of the Americas was democratic, pluralistic, and tolerant. No. I remember on number 3, I contended that, of course, by today's standards, they were intolerant. They were ethnocentric. They were inequitable. They were quite brutal on many occasions, the Spaniards. But I remember I tried to make the argument that they didn't know any better, that was the world back then. But because I have it by today's standards, that makes that totally wrong. Okay, number 6, you should be able to find under Columbus, the section of Columbus on the Black Legend, and number 1, capitalism for better and for worse, under the Southern colonies. Okay. Number 7, you're not going to find it in there. There are always a few that avoid it, that evade it. And so I have to rely upon lecture. Contributions. So notice, instead of having a conflict history, of having villains and heroes, winners and losers, functional history just says, how do we get to where we are today? Who contributed what, as far as institutions that exist today? So that's all we're doing is on number 7 is functional history. So a monotheistic belief in the Christian God, yes, the Spaniards brought that to the Native Americans. Elements of law we have borrowed from Rome and Germanic sources, yes. Modern notions of private ownership of property and of urban development, yes. And look at the last one, many elements of Hispanic or Latino culture, yes. But they had to teach Native American tribes how to cultivate the land? No. They had long cultivated the land. So again, you're looking for the wrong answer on that one. And number 8, remember, I called this kind of giving the devil his due, giving the Spaniards their due. They did have a system of accountability known as the juez de residencia, whereby the visitor general will put someone under house arrest and give people opportunities to lay any accusations against that Spanish official. And they allowed their slaves in Spanish America to buy their freedom without trying to make laws to put hurdles like the English do. So those are both true. Okay, number 9, I'm going to skip because it's pretty obvious. Number 1 of the Black Legend handout. Okay, I talk about that book. Number 10, Castillo's True History, somewhat justified Spanish conquest of the Aztec, depicting the latter as anything but meek sheep. That is true. And then I'm not sure if this is found in the writings, but so hence I'll cover it. Bernardino de Sahagún, he was the guy who had the young Aztec boys translate the Aztec codices into Spanish, right? He was protective of the Aztec. He wrote the book that's translated today as Broken Spears. The day that the Aztec spears were broken was their expression for the fall of Tenochtitlan. And he sympathized with them and made villains of his fellow Spaniards. Nevertheless, Sahagún was subjectively used by the instructor as evidence for the contention by some that by today's standards, even those early modern Euro-Americans who showed great intentions of treating natives well were not above the assumption that paternalistic action ought to be taken to make the natives change culturally. That is true. Remember, he said that he was under the belief that the Aztec were tricked by the devil in their religious beliefs, and so hence they needed to become Christian. I think I'll skip 12 because you could find that on the Missions, a Mixed Bag, in the Black Legend handout. I think I'll skip 13, but note that it is found in number 1 with the Black Legend in Las Casas. Look for Don Juan de Oñate in New Mexico, and I make it pretty clear whether that is true or false. And then I'll do 14. Which of the following does not constitute a region of modern-day U.S. claimed by Spanish adelantados, going forward claiming new land? Hernando de Soto claimed the deep south east of the Mississippi. Yes. Coronado claimed the present southwest, arguably up to Kansas. Yes. Cabrillo and later Serra and Portola claimed present-day California. Yes. Ponce de Leon claimed modern-day Massachusetts. No, they didn't go that high up. So that's the one that doesn't fit. Okay, I'll give you a hint on 15 instead of just giving the answer. D is one of them that is correct. In reality, and in some places more so than others, the average colonized man had limited economic opportunities and a slight voice in government. All right, 16, you should know pretty easily from number 7 of the Southern Colonies handout. Okay, anytime I use Alan Brinkley or textbook, I didn't have you guys this semester use a textbook. So clearly, I have to give you those. The textbook claims that rigid royal Spanish policies stifled economic development in the Americas. That is true. All right. So just remember that. That is true. 17. Number 18, look at number 1 of the Southern Colonies handout. For 18, okay? Look at number 1 and you'll know if that's true or false. Number 19 is right there. Remember David Price, his book Love and Hate at Jamestown, and its court history of John Smith in Jamestown. Take a look at that, and that one's pretty easy. As is the one before that, Helen Roundtree and her Native American perspective one. All right. 21, look in the Southern Colonies handout. Look for number 2 for A, Number 7 for B. Number 6 for C. And look and see if you find anything about women. If nothing, no section focuses on women in the southern colonies, then that was not mentioned. Number 22, Alan Brinkley contends in the textbook that the Spanish's command over Indian labor did not fully meet the demands for labor, so they opted for African slaves subsequently. That is true. So he has an economic thesis. Number 23, which of the following was mentioned as factual support of the thesis that slavery was not a racist, but a practical and convenient institution? So take a look at that in Southern Colonies handout, right after the 2 Jamestown ones. So what is number 4 in the Southern Colonies handout? Now, I'm not saying it's the only one that's right, but in case you don't find option C, that is right. They began making peace treaties with the Native Americans, and they did not want to jeopardize them by trying to enslave any of them. So I'm not saying that's the only one that's right, but C is right. Okay, 24, Bacon's Rebellion. I have that in 2 different numbers. I have that in number 4 on the economic interpretation to slavery, and I have it in number 1 on capitalism for better and for worse. So if you don't mind, I'm moving by that one. And then 25 is number 5 on the Southern Colonies handout, the legacy of racism. You should be able to find those. And remember, this is, I couldn't stop you if I wanted to. This is an open note test. So by all means, keep your argumentative assignments by you. And then number 26, French Louisiana, their defiance of old world mercantilist restrictions. Did it come from the idealism of her leaders, or did it come despite her leaders? And it's very clear in the very last number of the Southern Colonies handout, number 8. Number 27, again, number 7. The French with the Native Americans and Native American agency. Should help you with 27. Number 28. I don't know. I don't know if that's in one of the argumentative ones or not, or if this is another one that I just rely upon lecture. Albion Seed, very simple thesis, okay? And that is, look at A, the demographic, the category of the population that was to establish first effective settlement of each subsequent English North American colony, fashioned its future folkways in its own likeness, right? And that's the thesis in Albion Seed. Okay, so remember, the South was largely seigneurial under the gentry class. The North was largely bourgeois, people from the cities. And remember, the gentry class were not democratic. Okay. Which of the following does not match? That one's pretty easy. Religious tolerance in those 3 places. Number 30 is court history of William Penn. If you find that in the court history that we just covered, then it's true. Number 31 is revisionist history of William Penn. So the very next section, if you find that to be expressed, then it's true. Okay, likewise, number 32 is found in number 1 of today's Northern Colonies assignment, that they were progressive, democratic. And then the very next section, right, I did revisionist and talked about them being bullies and being tyrannical, angst-filled. '34, again, the Dutch, it's kind of redundant, and religious tolerance. So, of course, 35, according to Alan Brinkley, the British Navigation Acts were stifling to American colonists. No, they were not. You'll see the thesis right after we do this. The thesis that Alan Brinkley has is known as a salutary neglect thesis. He contends just the opposite, that no one abided by the Navigation Acts. And that helped bring about conflict with England. All right, I think I'll let you guys do 36. Number 37, it may not be in there. In the St. Lawrence River and Ohio Valley, tribes like the Iroquois took advantage of European demand for furs and militarily ensconced themselves into an economically vital partner position. That is true. And then 38, St. Augustine, established in Florida by the Spanish, is the oldest surviving Euro-American city. Yes, 1565. And then I'm going to let you do 39. That's the revisionist history of the Puritans with the covenant. And then number 40. This is kind of just like a taste of what's coming ahead for the War for Independence next. Tories in the English Parliament allied themselves with the colonists? No. The Tories were the conservatives who wanted to put us in our place and deal with us with a firm hand. So we largely fought against the Tories in the War for Independence. So 40 would be false. All right, so you guys ready to handle this test? What do you think, Olga? Good, I hope so. Kyle, great. That's great to hear. I appreciate you guys showing up so faithfully. But remember, okay, I'll put it in an announcement. I will be out of state next Thursday. But we have gone sufficiently ahead that it should be okay by the time we meet the following Thursday. I still don't think we'll be behind. All right.
Hi, Professor, I had one question on the test. Are these relatively this kind of the way the questions are going to be, and we just got to fill in a bubble, or we got to write these all out? And
you know what? I've never taken it as a student. I just fill them in on my side. You know what I mean, with the options A through E, and then I have to mark which one is the correct answer to me. So I would imagine it's something like a bubble of just hitting the right option.
All right.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
But good luck on it, Kyle. All of you guys. All right. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you guys, God willing. I'm so scared of flying, but God willing, in 2 weeks. You too? Yeah, I'm terrified of flying.
I'll fly safe.
Thank you. All right, you guys take care, okay?
I have a question when everyone is gone.
Yeah, okay.
One question before I go is this quiz open now, or is it like later in the week?
No, it's open now. And matter of fact, another good thing with test 1 is it allows multiple submissions. And of course, it keeps your highest score. So yeah,
Okay.
you could begin taking it right now if you want.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
No
Have a
problem.
good-
You too, Kyle.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, so if you guys don't have any questions, I have your names down. You guys have a good week. All right, take care and kick this test butt. Wow. Hi, Olga.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yes, I guess you got my email and we talked a little bit about it. I guess as a mistake, maybe for our confusion, I write over my second assignment and I erased the first one. And as a mistake, I submitted the first assignment and you probably noticed.
Yes.
And I looked for it and I couldn't find it. I was, oh my gosh, I didn't, yeah, it just happens. And I couldn't find it. I guess I erased it. And it says, why is this late? I submitted it before. And when I checked, that's one of the mistake that I made.
Okay,
So,
no problem. No problem.
so I just want to clarify that with you. And so the other one is due tomorrow, right? Not on Saturday.
Oh gosh, I have to look. Olga, I'm sorry. I have the dates written on them. I don't have them memorized. I apologize.
Okay, I just look at it. I thought it was every Saturday, but I just see this says due tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
So it will be tomorrow then. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, and when I'm familiar when I know a student is serious and she's applying herself and all that, then I can ignore late signs on those assignments.
Okay.
Okay, don't worry about it.
It's been kind of hard for me this class.
Yeah.
Tell you before, my first primary language is Spanish.
Yes,
And it's a lot to read.
it is.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, so I have to copy and paste, and just trying to translate it. And
Yes,
it's like too much. But I'm trying to pick one subject and just focus on that one.
that's right.
And being honest with you, I couldn't read everything because it's
Oh,
too
I
much
understand.
for
I
me. That I
understand.
focus on one and I just work on that one.
Sure. But you know something, Olga, I could if I could find the time, I would be happy to do little like resumens in Espanol. I write decently in Spanish.
Okay.
My Spanish is decent.
Yeah, I
It's not
read your
fluent, but it's
test. I read your email. I was, oh, you're good Spanish. That's good.
decent. Yeah, I used to be better back in school.
Oh
But
no,
yeah.
you're doing great. I mean, I read it and it was very, very understandable. I've been going through a lot. I have surgery. I just went to the doctor today and I'm a little bit with anesthesia right now. And plus my son cut his hand, deep hand,
Oh
take
no.
it to the ER, get some stitches, and it's
Oh,
like too much. It's like this is not the way how I want the semester to start.
yes.
This is my second year because I want to go for the nursing program and I'm taking physiology as well. And it's gonna challenge. So
Yes. Well, hang in there.
I'm
Hang in there.
trying to believe me.
Yeah.
So to clarify about I know you were reviewing some information. That information was in general that you were looking at it because I was kind of a little bit lost about it. You were reading.
Yes, I was just kind of given like resumens
Okay.
over each of the sections.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was thinking to print it out and just work on the tests based on those, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I
Yes.
know it's unlimited time, which is good. I don't have to be in a
That's
hurry.
right.
Take my time.
That's right.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, you have a safe trip, and I'm gonna be working on the assignment tonight because it's due tomorrow. So,
Okay. Thank you.
well, thank you very much, and
All
nice to
right.
meet you. Bye bye.
Nice to meet you too. Buena suerte con todo.
Gracias en
All
su
right.
vuelo también. Bye bye.
Bye bye.